Hi, I'm Hugh Whitmore. Welcome to the One True Church. Today I'm starting out talking about my children's novels because I am a novelist, but afterwards I will have a short Bible lesson that is a proof of the truth of the Bible based on how novels are written with something called story structure. But as for my novels, I have a 4-book series called the Three Madelines, which are fun and exciting adventure stories that are set in the current time in modern America. The books are aimed at the middle grade age, but you can certainly read them to your younger children. And even adults who read my novels say they enjoy them quite a bit. You Christian parents will appreciate that faith is a theme running through the entire series. Each book in the series provides an enjoyable emotional journey along with the main character, whose name is Madeline Stinson, against the exciting backdrop of crazy troubles she gets into with her 2 best friends, who by bizarre coincidence are also both named Madeline. So in the books there are ups and downs, fun and laughter, and life lessons to be learned for your kids, all through the Three Madelines. Another thing you'll get in each book is a big, crazy ending that you'll never see coming, which makes each book exciting to read from cover to cover. The first book in the series is called The Recipe, where our hero Madeline Stinson meets the other 2 Madelines, and the other girls think the coincidences that brought them together are so great that their meeting was actually a recipe made up right in God's kitchen. The girls get into a dispute over the real nature of this recipe. And then they get into some hilarious trouble at school they have to work their way out of. And then there's my big crazy ending you never see coming. Book 2 of the series is called Dawn, where the entire summer gets turned upside down for the girls and results in some serious detective work for Madeline to figure things out. Dawn, Book 2, is where Madeline starts to really show her love for the outdoors that started in Book 1. But of course, that too, her love of the outdoors, results in some crazy trouble for the girls, which leads to another huge crazy ending. Book 3 is called The Farm. And The Farm, this is also exciting and fun, but Madeline shows some advanced emotional maturity by stepping up to solve a long-standing family problem. The Farm is sort of a homecoming, and the book of the series that adults say they like the most. The ending, of course, is huge, and this one is nuts. I go back myself and read the ending to The Farm, and I'm bug-eyed. It's just spectacular and crazy. I read my own novels from time to time, and I tend to enjoy the journey just like every other reader would. Finally, Book 4 is called The Homestead, which is a place in Iowa that Madeline ends up not really by her own choice. But while she's there, she really shows that she can help a friend because she's there because her friend is in a bad spot. And it's not really her fault, the friend. Madeline again shows maturity for a young age in helping solve her friend's problem. And then she takes a starring role in the big and scary ending that you'll get each time. So in the Three Madelines, there's fun, there's faith, there's humor and laughs, there are deep friendships that mean something, and there is emotional growth that you and your children will appreciate together. You can get the books on Amazon in paperback or Kindle by searching my name, Hugh Whitmore, or the title, which is The Three Madelines. And I really think you'll enjoy them as a family and read them over and over. So that's now for my kids' novels. But now to the brief Bible lesson I promised. When you're trained as a novelist or a screenwriter, that's somebody who writes movies, you follow something called story structure. And this is so common that it's second nature. You don't write a novel and you don't write a screenplay unless you know story structure, because you couldn't get it published. Everybody who writes knows this. It's very common. And what it is a series of plot points at certain places in the story. And every novel you read and every movie you watch has these plot points associated with this thing called story structure. Story structure comes in something called beats, like musical beats, regularly timed, which are emotional turning points through the story, common to every novel and movie, as I've said. And I use 11 beats, with the 11th being an emotional wrap-up for the story. The Bible follows this story structure. And I'm going to give you some of the beats, all of the beats of the Bible, but I have to do it very briefly and in a condensed fashion because it would probably take a full hour to fully explain the story structure of the Bible. So I'm going to give it to you briefly just to prove my point that this is one more proof of the one true God and his Messiah. First beat, first story points, first plot point of story structure in the Bible. It's called Introduce Your Main Character in Their Old World. It's called the Old World because it's going to change. Every novel has change, and every novel has strife and upset and upheaval. Conflict. No conflict, no novel. Same is true of the Bible. We know that. There's a lot of conflict in the Bible. So it's called Introduce Your Main Character in the Old World, plot point number 1. And it's called the Old World because it's going to change. Genesis 1:1 through 2:3 represents the Old World for God, and Genesis 2:4 through 3:24 starts the New World. And it changes a lot for God between these two parts of the Bible. In the beginning, in 1:1 through 2:3 of Genesis, God's all spirit and fully sovereign in this first story. And they're both called creation stories, but they're not. The first one is a creation story. The second one's really a destruction story. Anyway, there's a mixture of spirit and flesh in the second story, and God is not fully sovereign. God's purely spirit in the first one and partly flesh in the second. You can read them both, or you can watch my video, The Most Important Instruction in the Bible, if you'd like that explained to you in more detail. That's plot point number 1, introduce the main character in their old world. Plot point number 2 is called the inciting incident. Every novel, every movie has this, and so does the Bible. A huge event shakes up the old world of the main character, and a huge obstacle is introduced to their life, because every movie and every novel has a major obstacle for the hero. This is in the Bible in Genesis 3, where Satan invents sin, as represented by the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And this is the inciting incident that gets our hero, God, to start considering changing his old world. And then it moves on to plot point number 3. The main character responds to the inciting incident. In our case, in the Bible, God curses Satan in Genesis 3:14. But the curse doesn't work. Satan continues to grow in power through the Bible. That's the nature of this plot point. We have a hero, you have the inciting incident, and he responds to it, or she, whatever the novel is or the movie. And they still think they're in their old world and they can control it the way they used to, but they're not really, because they have this new thing, this antagonist, which is the anti-hero in every novel. So God responds to this inciting incident by cursing Satan, but it doesn't work. But that's our wonderful mission as Christians, to help God overcome Satan, which I teach on frequently here at the One True Church. Fourth plot point, the lock-in, it's called. This is where the main character finally realizes they're not really in their old world anymore. In our case, in the Bible, God needs to overcome Satan. He realizes he can't do it by his old power in the beginning, where he had fully spirit and fully sovereign. Now he's knocked down because this power of sin in the world draws power away from God. So he calls Abraham and the Hebrews to fulfill this new thing he needs to help him, called his plan of salvation. Okay, then plot point number 5 happens. The hero in their new world. In movies, sometimes it's called fun and games in the new world, because now the hero realizes what they need to do, and they're in a new world, and they move towards it with great gusto. So it's called fun and games in the new world. Now God does this because he has a new task before him. And in the general sense, in plot point number 5, the hero makes progress, but unknown to the hero is that the antagonist or anti-hero is gaining in power. And this is played out in the Bible within this horribly dysfunctional relationship God has with Israel, where the power of Satan is growing right within the community of God's chosen people. So God is moving towards a solution by calling the Hebrews and giving them the law that he gave through Moses, but Satan is growing in power and building up a stronghold, a fortress right inside Israel. So we get to plot point number 6. It's called the false victory. This is the exact middle of every movie and every novel, the false victory. This is where the hero has something happen that seems great for them and turns out to be a false victory. Here the hero thinks he's conquered the obstacle that was put before him early in the book, in the novel. He thinks it's the best day of his life, but it turns out to be his worst. And this is where God chose David as his anointed one, because David ends up sinning and God has to turn from David, which is a metaphorical prophecy of God later having to turn from Israel. God picked David as his anointed one, but David sinned and God had to move on. That's the false victory. After the false victory, we have plot point number 7. The hero's world falls apart. The antagonist is rising and the hero's allies fall away from him. The hero's world begins to crumble. And in the book or in the movie, the action starts to go down for our hero. In this case, God turns over power to David's son, Solomon, hoping everything will work out because he had to turn away from David, who he was going to let build the temple, but he turned that over to Solomon. And so Solomon, he starts out as obedient, but then Solomon famously turns to Satan, and things are never the same with Israel thereafter, and everything falls down for God for most of the rest of the book, not completely. So then we have plot point number 8 as the fortunes drop for the hero. It's called the showdown with the antagonist. The hero loses this battle, but he doesn't know why, which is the second major blow to the hero after the false victory. In our story, the Bible, the showdown with the antagonist is when God is angry enough at Israel to let Satan deliver them into exile in Babylon so they can be severely punished, so they'll come back to knowing him as the one true God. Babylon was the seat of Satan at the time and the home of the power that runs the world, which is this Babylonian death cult we still have today running our world. God loses this showdown with the antagonist, Satan, because Israel returns from Babylon. And they start to follow God, but then they fall away again completely, and the grip of Satan is too great on them to ever leave. And that's completed for us in the book of Revelation, that story of how Israel turns so completely and almost like rottenly to the core to Satan. Anyway, so all this strife happens in our book, in our novel as well, the Bible novel. And so the hero is falling and falling until he has plot point number 9, which is the epiphany of the hero. This is where the main character hits rock bottom and searches himself in a fundamental way and undergoes an internal change for the better, which changes his resolve and crystallizes him to act on the problem he thought he was solving before, but he couldn't. Here is where God gives up on Israel. Very sad. It's sort of a love story gone wrong element in the Bible that God has with Israel. And so once this epiphany happens in our novel, in any movie, then the hero knows what to do. And they act. From the standpoint of the novel writer, we're told we don't need to tell the reader anything more. We just show them. And this is where the hero acts. He needs no more instructions. Internally he changed, and he goes for his change and knows what he needs to do to solve his problem, to overcome Satan. The hero's changed internally, and he sets out to solve his problem with bold resolve. In our case, God sends Jesus to be the anointed one, through whom salvation will be fulfilled and God's kingdom returned. And that's because God is internally changed to stop fighting Satan on his own terms, which was through rough and evil and barbaric actions like animal sacrifice. And God turns to fighting Satan on his own terms, which is through love. And that's why Jesus came for us. So normally for a novel, after 10, the hero acts, sending Jesus in our case, we would be at the final story structure plot point, number 11, where we wrap up the novel emotionally with a happy ending. The Bible does follow classic story structure, which is one more proof of the incredible nature of the book of truth that we call our Bible, and how it has the hand of God in it and the hand of Satan. But the truth can be found there if you follow the story properly, despite the hand of Satan. Those who seek to destroy the one true God say that the fact the Bible has story structure only proves that the book is fiction. But that is backward from the truth, because we know the story adds up to a spiritual knowledge that gives us the truth of the one true God and his Messiah. So if you read the Bible like a novel and see the patterns and themes, then you can learn the whole truth of the book and access the mystery of the kingdom Jesus spoke of in Mark 4 when he explained the parable of the sower. At that time, he asked believers in Mark 4 to take all Scripture as a story, or as a parable, as he called it. The problem with the Bible as a novel is that the story is interrupted by Paul's false testimony, which turns believers from the kingdom teachings God sent through Jesus. So that's why we've been waiting 2,000 years for God and Jesus to return. But that's our glorious mission as believers, and my mission as the one true church, to throw off the chains of Paul's false testimony and his false gospel, and to return to the difficult teachings that God gave Jesus through the kingdom teachings. Help God overcome Satan by those teachings and live in eternity with our loving Father and his anointed one, Jesus of Nazareth.